So welcome to the Ladies Fixing the World. This is episode 10 of season 2, and as those who are watching the video will note, I'm sporting my glasses. I'm 50 now, just turned the corner last week. I'm grateful again to be co-hosting this podcast with Sue Elvis, joining from Australia. Sue is a long-term blogger from the community of unschoolers, and you have contributed immensely to making this take on life available and making it something you can take in and understand for everyone. So thank you, Sue, for joining me today.
Hi, Cecilia. Hi, Sandra. Thank you for those kind words, Cecilia, and happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you. That's why I said it, really. No, it was the glasses. Also, I have Sandra Dodd with me, and Sandra, she is joining from the USA, and I would say you're a first mover, right? Sandra's been the wisdom spreader for so many years, and I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome, Sandra.
Thank you. We would talk about doubts and fears because some people assume that experienced unschoolers are never afraid of anything, they've never been afraid, that they are confident about every moment. That's not true, but it's not good to dwell on the doubts. It's good to see them and go, I know how to get around this. I know how to get over this. And to help other people do that too. Once in a discussion, somebody said, I want everyone here to share the worst days you've had, or something like that, when terrible things happen. And I wasn't there. I wasn't there when that happened. It was in a discussion by email, and things could have gone quickly. But Pam Sarushian saw it, and she came in and said, no, that's not what we're going to do. Because that just causes people to be afraid of things that haven't even happened to them. It will cause a lot of, fear and wallowing and fixation on what could go wrong. I was so glad she did that because it could have been a big pile of dirt. And so, yes, it happens, but it's not good to pile it up and put a spotlight on it, which is odd, but honest. So I didn't decide to unschool before I had kids like some people have. I figured my kids would go to school. John Holt wrote about how children learn and how children fail at first before he was ever thinking about homeschooling at all. But he wrote in Teach Your Own in 1981. That was his book about homeschooling. He wrote, in World War I, we first began to see evidence that prolonged anxiety, stress, and fear can have great destructive effects on the human nervous system. When parents don't know that, they can work themselves up into an unhealthy frenzy, or they can become sort of paralyzed from fear. And so that's why I've always been out with the cheerleaders, with the other moms going, be happy, watch birds, be sweet, be good, because that fear can be crippling.
We have to recognize, though, that it's going to poke its ugly head out now and then. The fear and the doubt. And some people around us might feel like they're the one making that hole for that poking head even bigger than it needs to be. I totally 100% agree that fear is not a playmate. Fear is not someone we take to the dance floor. Fear is not a helper. Sometimes I think it's worth it to stop and think about it for a little while. Think about, is this an alarm that I need to actually pay attention to, or is it just a bad habit? Usually it's the last. I think all unschoolers, maybe even all home educators, possibly everyone, experience fears based on you make a choice and it's your responsibility. You made that choice, and then you have the doubt, and from there comes the fear. And what do we do about that? We do not pile up all the bad experiences. I agree. But can we just, so if we can just turn our heads away, not pay attention to fear and doubt at all, and say, I'm just going to ignore you. Then this podcast episode is actually over before Sue even said anything.
There's a contagion with fear.
There's what?
A contagion with fear.
Yes.
If one person's afraid and they talk about it, then other people go, "Oh, I wasn't afraid of that before. Maybe I should have been. Maybe I should be. I hadn't thought about it." When I was in third grade, this picture is in my mind too much. When I was in third grade, a kid in our class threw up on the floor, puked, and all of us rushed up to look. And a couple of kids puked on that, and the teacher's going, get back, because it just could have turned into 25 kids in the same. But it was, it's funny now, many years later, but that day I feel so bad for the teacher and for the kids too. I wasn't one of them, but I could have been. So I think being afraid and sharing fears can be like that too. And it's just a natural human reaction to someone else's fear is to be afraid.
True.
I
That's very
encounter fear and doubt in two different areas. And one is people who come to my blog or listen to my podcast, and then will I say I'm afraid about, and the other one is my own fears. And I think that the people who are coming to me and expressing their fears, I say I have to. I want to give them some positive tools, maybe for thinking through those fears rather than pushing them away, but to think through them and help them with that way. But then later on, maybe I have a fear of my own, and I think, oh my goodness, I can't admit that fear because I've just helped somebody else through a similar fear, and now I'm sitting here being afraid. We were talking, Cecilia, in a previous conversation, not a recorded one, but just a conversation we had privately about how sometimes people look at us in the public eye unschooling and think we live fairy tale lives. Maybe we have got it all worked out and we never fear or doubt about anything. And for me, that isn't quite true, though as well, those fears and doubts I know have no control over me, that I'm going to do it anyway. But they niggle at me a few sometimes before I get my sense back and move on from them. But I just wonder, how do you encounter fear and doubt in your own lives? Is it personal or is it through other people's fears and doubts? I imagine, Cecilia, you might have a lot of clients who express fears and doubts to you. And I would be really interested to hear about what type of fears and doubts, even though we can make a catalogue of all the things that could go wrong, but also how you address them, what positive tools, thoughts, experiences of your own that you share that actually help people.
I think the mechanism that's interesting to go into around the fear and the doubt, or the fear that comes from the doubt, is to understand why are we experiencing this? Where does this fear is an emotional response to thoughts, basically. And so we have to question those thoughts, understand where do they come from. And I think a very basic mechanism that I've been working with many, many times is, if you send your children off to be raised by others, it feels like you're sending the responsibility for it with them. Whereas when you take them home and teach your own, then suddenly you realize, it's my responsibility. Maybe it's my shared responsibility with my husband or partner and my children. We share it. But I can't blame it on anyone else if something goes wrong, really.
Yeah, that's a good point, Cecilia. That if something goes wrong in the school, our children come out of school saying they haven't got a particular skill, it's not our fault unless you say, well, you shouldn't, I shouldn't have sent my child to that school. But it's we can say that's the school's fault. Somebody in the school should have done that. But when we have our children at home and maybe our child doesn't have a skill that they wish they had, I don't think that's a problem anyway. But just say, and yeah, who that burden of responsibility is on only on us. But that sort of goes into whose responsibility is an education, the child's or the parents, and uh, that's another topic. But yeah, I understand what you're saying there. Is that what you were saying, Cecilia? That
It is what I'm
responsibility?
saying. It's one of my main. It's one of the things I make a poster or a T-shirt about. It's always been your responsibility. It's your kids. I've written several blog posts about it as well. That it's a fake reality that it's not your responsibility if you outsource some of the hours and some of the tasks that you think have to be done. It's still your child. It's still your family. It's still your responsibility. It's just for us home educators, it becomes very clear. So that's one mechanism I usually look at if people feel fear. Another one is the always very good question you can ask is it true? You hold this idea that's sparking some fear, you have this thought. Do you know it's true? I mean, can we question that thought? Is it really true? If they don't learn math by before they're 15, they can never become a doctor or whatever the fear is, they might never get a boyfriend because they're not exposed to enough social life, whatever it is. I mean, lots of different thoughts that create fear. It's a good idea always, whether the fear is around home educating your children or anything else, to question the thought that lies behind it and just ask yourself, how do I know this is true? I hold this idea, but how do I really know? Do I really know it's true? A lot of freedom comes from asking that question.
That makes me think of how sometimes we think things are true because the majority of people believe them, and people sort of adopt the ideas of the majority without questioning whether it is true or not. And that just because some minority believes something doesn't make it not true, doesn't make it false. Yeah. So I guess as unschooling people, people can write us off and say they're just crazy, they're weird, uh, they won't maybe listen to the ideas because we're not mainstream.
Yeah. But I think there's a mainstream thing in experiencing fear and doubt and feeling unsafe and just sometimes wonder, could I have done something else? Should I have done something else? It's a line of thought. It's normal that it emerges, and I totally agree with what Sandra said in the beginning. Don't go that way. Not helpful. It's not going to do anything good for you. It's just going to pile up a lot of negative ideas and a lot of negative thoughts and emotions, and they're not helpful. It's normal to have it, and then it's normal to get your hands dirty, and then you go home and wash them.
When something is very mainstream and a lot of people are getting paid to say it, then it must seem like truth because there's money involved. That's one aspect. But I used to do real-time text chats where people would come into a room and we'd all just be texting like crazy. And occasionally a dad would come in there, and very rarely was he in there to say, what good ideas you ladies have. So one guy came in there one day and he used quotation marks in this way to me, very antagonistically, are you willing to Risk your child's future on your theories. He put on quotes on theories, as though I didn't even really have theories. And I said, yes, aren't you? Because everyone who thinks it's better to send their kids to school is risking their children's future on their theory.
Yes.
Yeah.
We all base our choices on what we believe to be true.
Right.
We don't necessarily agree on what that truth is. But the question is, am I willing to risk my child's future? The thing is, it's fake to think that truth, that the child's future is safe and held if we live the mainstream life. That is a lie. It's not true. And it's not hard to see. People fail. Lots of people fail. And lots of people have lots of different problems. And then hopefully they overcome them at some point. But the school is not a guarantee that nothing will ever fail. So why are we being targeted to be pushed into a more fearful state? And how do we protect ourselves from that fear? And that's another point I wanted to, and then I forgot about it before, is that it's a more lonely spot sometimes to be in, to be the unschooling mom in the context of maybe more mainstream people. Why are you doing this? How does it make you have to kind of defend your fort all the time, and maybe you don't have anyone to team up with. Maybe your truth and reality is not being shared by anyone in the room or anyone in the village, and it can become a very lonely thing. And loneliness also is a place where we can easily feel insecure, and from there comes the doubt, and from the doubt comes the fear, and from the fear comes the misery. So we need to ravel that back and say, I can stay with my truth. I don't need to defend it. Defending it sends out the meta message that it needs to be defended, that it's being attacked, that I'm being attacked, and no one needs to be in that position. I've said many times in my personal life, not in my professional life, said many times in my personal life, I don't want to defend my lifestyle in this conversation. I don't see why I have to do that.
What I used to say as a defense, it wasn't so much a defense as a shutdown of the discussion, but it was also very true. They would say, what if this doesn't work? I'd say, if it stops working, we're trying this for now. I would say, we're trying this for now. If it stops working, we'll do something else. And it stopped the argument. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to defend it. But it also gave them hope. If the person was hoping that they would tell me, you shouldn't be doing this, there are other things you could do, I just admitted that. I just said, we're trying it for now, and if it stops working, then. So I put an if-then switch on it that made them feel so good. And they're hoping for me to fail anyway, so they can keep hoping because I didn't. But I I think when someone comes and says, I'm so afraid, I'm so panicky, I don't know what to do, I can't breathe. I mean, I just say, what are you afraid of? And very often, if they've only been unschooling a year or two, it's school. They're afraid of some vision of school. They're holding their kids up to the idea of where would they place? Would they be behind or ahead? What are they not learning? All the school structure. And I say, okay, you need to de-school more. You're still living in school world. You need to dismantle all the school and not be looking at school and not be thinking about school. I still remember, because I loved school as a kid. I wanted to become a teacher, and I did become a teacher. I went to university straight from high school. I was like, school, school, school. I lived with that schedule for years, for what, 12, 16, 20 years or more, like without fail. Sometimes I went to summer school, but I always knew how many weeks till school started. I always knew when the next break was. That was just part of like natural life for me. It seemed as natural to me as spring and summer and fall. It wasn't, but I didn't know that. I had no reason to know that. So when I started unschooling, I consciously, very consciously was trying to not know or care. When you go to a museum and it's empty, that's nice. When you go to a museum and a school group shows up, oh yeah, school day. But so sometimes it's useful for unschoolers to know when the park's going to be empty or maybe full. But I had a friend who was teaching, and Holly and I went a couple of times to play a dictionary game that I used to play when I was a teacher. And I still had a batch of dictionaries. And the game was I would pass the dictionaries out to these kids. They wouldn't be my students at that point, it'd be friends of mine who were teaching, and I'd come in as a guest to talk about the history of English. And I would say, find all of this, it was the American Heritage Dictionary that had really good etymologies. So when you go to a word, it tells you what it came from. Came from Middle English, from Old English, from, German, something like that. So I would say, I would show them a little bit how to read those. And I said, pick a word, and I bet I can guess 85% or whatever. And they go, no, you can't. I go, okay, 90%. No, you can't. I could probably do 98%, but they didn't know that. So I would set some goal that seemed like hard, but not impossible. And they first would start giving me long words. And all the long words are Latin. Anything that's got 4 syllables came from Latin. That's easy. And so I would tell them after two or three of those, I go, don't do any more long words, because especially if it has TION at the end, that's from Latin, because this is how it works. So as it goes, I'm telling them what Norse words look like in English, what French words look like in English, what Spanish words look like in English. It was fun. So I'm going to go do this for a friend of mine who's a teacher. She's my next door neighbor now. I've just moved back to our old house, and she's still here. She was here when we were here. I love her, Mo Palmer, and she's a historian. So she was teaching a history class. I said, it's gonna be hard for me to come next week. Can I come like the second week of June? And she said, school's out then. At that point, Holly was 10, so I was almost 50. I was in my 40s. And I went, for the first time in my life, I didn't know. I acted and assumed that I could go do her class in June. School's out in June. It was wonderful. There was another wonderful day like that when Kirby was a baby. We weren't unschooling yet, but I used to get so frustrated and mad, and I would like react angry. I would get angry if something didn't go well. And I was taking Kirby to a doctor's appointment. He was 1 or 10 months or some, baby that he could walk a little bit, but I'm washing him in a baby bathtub. Had him clean, had him dressed, had him in the other room. It's time to go. I picked up the baby bathtub, and it's plastic, and it bent and poured water all over the kitchen floor. And I didn't get mad. I went, I should have left it there till we got back. To myself, I just thought, that I didn't need to, why was I doing that? And I threw towels on it and got him and went. And that was the first time that I saw that I had moved from where I always whimpered and cried, made a deal, like I'm a martyr. Why do these things happen to me? Until I just went, that was my mistake. It's not a big one. And ever after that, I was much more able to calmly accept a little temporary setback or disaster, error, whatever, without feeling stupid, without feeling like I need to be ashamed, I need to blame somebody, so this isn't okay. That was a turning point for me. That was another turning point when I didn't know what school time it was. So I knew it could happen for people, even though it might take a decade more than you thought. And so I would always just encourage people, if you're thinking any school thoughts, try not to. Try to step away from grades, comparisons, grade levels, reading levels. Anything that is a school term is not as natural as spring, summer, and fall. They're not. Semesters and school years are not natural. And so I could say that calmly and peacefully to them, and they could not, no one can dismantle it all at once. You can't just gather it all up, sweep it, put it in the bin, and it's done. You have to gradually remind yourself that's not what we're doing. Doesn't matter.
As Sandra, you were saying, I noted down here, parents wonder if their kids are ahead or behind. Do you think sometimes parents keep the thought of school at the back of their minds because they have this fear that unschooling isn't going to work, and they want their child to slot back into the school system where they would have been if they hadn't taken them out of school? So that's a fear that it's going to not work and the kids are not going to fit back into school. So there's a double fear there. Uh, and so parents find it hard to act as if school doesn't exist because at the back of their mind it does, because it might not work. How do you get around that?
Well, the term for that is self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't think it's going to work, if you're not planning to live as though it can work, it's not going to work.
Mm.
Because if the parents are just kind of trying unschooling, the kids will never relax into that flow of doing whatever comes by in the moment and learning. They will, I think, if children think the parents are just temporarily trying something, whether it's letting them have all the cookies they want, letting them watch TV, um, letting them play in the yard until it's dark, whatever it might be that the parents used to say no about, now the parents are saying yes about. If the child thinks this will be the way my whole life will calmly be, for many years, maybe not my whole life, but my childhood, that my parents are committed to this, they're calm about it, they're not worried about it, then they'll be able to relax and do the things that we tell unschoolers will happen. If the parents are jittery and nervous and talking schoolishly and going, I don't know if this is going to work, I don't know if this is going to work, why aren't you doing what you're supposed to do? Like they're kind of blaming the kids for not becoming unschoolers so that the parents can relax. That's the recipe for school, going back to school. So I just have, as those discussions and complaints and questions came along, I've tried to point out to the people that they have one foot in the school. I don't swim, but it seems true that if you have one foot on the shore, you can't swim. I have
So you
swum
have to
race.
make a commitment to it. There's something else you said there about kids, they pick up on your what your feelings, your worries, that you're not comfortable with it, and they know it's not going to last. And that I was wondering one day about worry and how parents do get concerned and worried, and that the effect that has on our children. And one day I was thinking, well, perhaps if a parent worries about their child, the child might think, my mother cares about me. She's worried because she wants the best for me. And then one day I thought, well, perhaps it's not that. Perhaps the child thinks I'm a problem. I'm a problem to my parents. My parents are always worrying about me. I'm a problem. And that sort of gave me a different sort of feel about it all. That not how do kids interpret our concerns, our worries, and our feelings? And we have well, say parents in general are worried because they want the best for their kids. They love their kids, but it's very negative and it affects relationships, worries, and concerns. It's not always interpreted as something, oh, I'm glad you're worried about me. Um, yeah, it doesn't do any good, does it?
Lord, let me read something that a mom wrote a while back, almost 20 years ago, but it's very good. She just used to write by the name of Jay Bantaw, and I don't know her real name. For the first time in what seems like my entire life, I am not terrified. She was talking about being in a discussion group. I think it was Always Learning. I'm not sure anymore. Up until now, I've been wielding my alarm and anxiety like a sword and shield, battling against the world. I thought that's what I was supposed to do. Isn't that what a good parent does? I thought that fear was a parenting tool that told you how to keep your children safe. I felt that letting go of that fear meant I was a bad parent. My paranoia had spilled into every part of our lives. And so I want to go back to the beginning of the paragraph was, for the first time in what seems like my entire life, I'm not terrified.
Yeah, and we find a lot of things online where parents are labeled as good parents because they're, as you just said, they have their fears, their concerns, they have their rules and regulations because they're afraid. And sometimes maybe unschoolers are labeled as irresponsible because we try to let go of those fears. and yeah, live without them.
I also think we need
Insufficiently
to
afraid.
question the fear. I feel like we're also taught what to be afraid of in a way. There's a mainstream into thinking, oh, I'm afraid that they are behind.
That's
I
the
could
kids at
come up
school.
with better things to be afraid of, really. I mean, there are other dangers in this life than how much you know and how well you can perform at the specific age cutoff. If I am to be afraid of something, I think it should be more severe than that. It should be something aligned with my value system, something that I would consider a catastrophe. And I think some of these fears are just, it's just things that we keep repeating, so it sounds like it's true that this is a bad thing. It's a little bit down the lines. I've been thinking about this whole what if it doesn't work question, and I want to question that as well. What is it that's supposed to work about it?
Right.
The thing that even saying does unschooling work? Well, that assumes we're aiming for a specific outcome. So are we doing like a secret manipulative pretend let go situation where we want them to at the end of that become something specific that they would have also been have become in a perfect version of a school system? Or what is it? What is it about it? Of course it works. I mean, but it's not a machine. It's a
Right.
life strategy. It's about living a fulfilling life with respect and a decent openness and enough options to choose from to always be able to do something that makes sense. And if you do that, even in the first steps when the whole deschooling is still happening and it's all kind of weird, it'll work. If that's what you're aiming for and you're doing it, well, then it works. You're getting it. So how can it not work?
Sometimes it helps to, in discussions about unschooling, like this one, I suppose, to remind people that schools don't work the way schools even claim they're going to work. Because if a teacher gives all of her students an A, the administration will come back and say, wrong, 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 you can't do this. Because they are grading people, like grading meat, like grading eggs, like, grading lumber. The best is on this pile and it's expensive. The other stuff is here. The other stuff is going to be firewood because it's not good. So in schools, for an A to be worth anything, however your grading system works, you have 4.0 or top of the class or, top 30% or whatever you're calling it. For that to be something, a big deal, worth getting a certificate about, worth putting on your resume, on your curriculum vitae, then there have to be some failures. Have to be. Otherwise, the A is worthless. So schools know, and it's sad and horrible and it's not talked about. Schools know before the school year starts that 20% of those kids are going to fail, that 40% are going to be behind. That's how it works. But that doesn't happen with unschooling. So reminding unschoolers that in a family of 3 or 5 kids, of one child certainly, there's not a grading system. Each child can be a success, even if one of them doesn't do anything but run around in the backyard and play with sticks and rocks and, look at birds and trees. They might be learning a whole lot of biology. They might not. They might be getting big muscles. They might not. Something's happening. If they're doing what they're interested in, we don't know what they're learning. We don't know what they'll end up doing later on. It might be forestry or landscaping or farming. Who knows? Who knows?
Poetry.
Yeah, poetry. So if because it's such a different model than school, they shouldn't be compared. And I know what Sue asked about people wondering if they want to get their kid back in school, but if they're going to drive alongside the school and keep looking over there, looking over there, looking over there, their kid's not being unschooled. Their kid is not living a rich life of exploration and exposure to things, or just relaxing at home on some day where all of the other kids are taking a standardized test. The advantages of unschooling can't be met if the parent has fears that are built out of school parts.
Hmm. One thing
What
you were
else?
saying, Cecilia, about what if unschooling doesn't work and then having a secret agenda? What do we really want our kids to get out of being an unschooler? What are we hoping for? And then I was thinking about, well, what about bringing up kids who don't have the same fears as our generation? That wouldn't that be wonderful that they had totally different ideas and they weren't held back by the same fears and doubts that maybe we've had to struggle through? Certainly, a lot of other people are still struggling through. On the whole, society struggles through it. But to have kids who see things differently and realize that all the fears and doubts that a lot of people struggle with are not worth struggling about, as you were saying, is it true? Uh, yeah, I was just thinking about that as you were talking, that what is freedom? I've addressed that question so many times. What is freedom when we talk about unschooling? And it's meant different things to me on different days. And one of them is that freedom from conventional thinking that produces these fears and doubts. Yeah, but oh, you were saying can't compare to school. So Sandra, how would you address that if somebody came to you and said that they had one foot in school, kept looking over their shoulder at school? Would you have any advice for them or suggestions, or would you think that really, if they can't commit to unschooling, it's not going to be a success?
I can't change the facts. If they can't commit, it won't be a success. So I would probably say, if you want to do it, let's do it. Come on over here. Where people have already figured out how to do it well and happily and calmly. We can help you, but we can't help you if you're more attached to school than you are relaxing into learning. And when that happens, I talk about learning because when their fears of school are very rarely about learning, they're about grades and credits and things like that. They're very often the mechanics of credits. We all know that there are kids at school who are not learning. We've all been to school and we've seen kids who were there and there and there, and they were thinking about other things, doing other things, resisting learning. If they felt like they had learned something, they'd be frustrated with themselves, they'd be irritated. So school is not all about learning. School is all about being there because the law says you have to be there. That's how prison works. You have to be there. People aren't always waking up in the morning going, oh, goody, another day. Same with school. If they can think of anything else, they'd rather do. And if the fears that the parents have are school-based, sometimes it helps to point out to them that they're still afraid of school. They're still afraid of the principal. They're still afraid. What if their kids could grow up without those fears? What if the school-based fears and the school-based doubts that people have, maybe I'm not good enough, maybe I'm below average. What if your children don't have those? And aside from the other things that people worry about school, about maybe abuse, maybe bullying, that sort of thing, what if the child is an ideal student and still comes out with those feelings? Because school puts them in you. School sets these little trigger things in you. They condition you so that they can quickly turn you. They can quickly make you embarrassed. They can quickly make you feel bad. And the principal wants to see you is like a magic one of those. If the principal wants to see you to do something good, it doesn't come like that with a message from another kid. You have to go to the principal's office. And so we know those things, but our kids, unschooled kids who didn't go to school, don't know those kinds of things. And parents who just came out of school don't know that there are some people who have never experienced that. They're in that country where their kids are going to school. They're in that country where the parents went to school. But as children, they're not being conditioned to get excited if someone writes an A down on a piece of paper. Ooh, she wrote an A down. Like what? She just wrote on a piece of paper. Or the principal wants to see you. Oh no, he'll probably call my mom. I'm in some trouble. Those, it seems silly at a distance, but when you're in it, when you're young and you're in school, they're big. They're big on the horizon. You can't see past them. And what if your children could live where that wasn't on their radar, that wasn't on their map at all? It's something so different. You have to move, you have to keep moving toward it until you can't see the school anymore. You just have to turn your back on the school and don't look at it for a while, for years.
Hmm. Sandra, you said that you enjoyed school, but a lot of my motivation and commitment to unschooling is based on my own experiences at school and looking back at my school life and what I came out of with it, what I came out of it with. I don't want that. I didn't want that for my children. And there's so many things about school that you can think about and think, well, I didn't learn. I gave that example in a previous episode about how when I finished uni, I threw all my books in the bin. And that was as much as I valued my education. I was glad it was over. And I can look about back and think that didn't work. That wasn't an enjoyable experience. That didn't help me become the person that I am, that I really should have been. But some people look back and you might share your own experiences and ask them about theirs, and they might say, "Oh, yeah, school was horrible. I hated it. I got bullied. I didn't do what I wanted to do." But some people say, it made me tough. And everybody has to go to school. And my children are going to school because I survived and they will survive and they'll just have to deal with it and they'll become tough. And that really makes me feel sad that we repeat mistakes or that we impose a system which didn't work for us on our children and take a positive spin on it and pretend that it's good for those kids when it's not. I have no answer to that one. Have either of you come across that?
It's
I think
natural
I've come
human
across a
instinct.
lot of it. A lot of it was good enough for me, so it's good enough for my kids. And a lot of it's really hard to talk to people who has put their kids through the system and maybe they're halfway through or more, and because they keep repeating doing it every morning, they have to keep repeating to themselves that it makes sense, because otherwise you made a mistake every morning for maybe 8 years and it was a mistake that happened to your child. It's not a nice truth to come about. So I think this holding on to things it's natural. The psychology of it is natural and understandable. It's very hard to let go of a truth that you have been holding on to for a long time and also been conditioned into yourself. Um, Kind of wanted to touch upon the A on the piece of paper you said before. So if you're the straight A student, you know you could be not that, and you also know that your value is your A's, not your personality, not your presence, not the hugs you can give or the joy you bring to the table, but the fact that someone thinks you're smart. I've worked with a lot of people who have to heal almost like a trauma from that, who has to find out who they are and that they are actually valuable just for being. We were a miracle when we came here. We were loved unconditionally the second someone put their eyes on us, and we still are. But that feeling of being welcome and being awesome, it gets lost in this whole matching up against performance in the school system. And even if you are on top of it, you're inside the same logic where you could be not on top of it, and where who you are and your value stems from, is it an A, a B, or a C? It's not a
Somewhat.
nice dynamic.
When you were telling that though, when you started saying you're loved from the moment you're born and people see you and you're loved unconditionally, I was thinking about me. So I threw myself into what you were saying. There I was, and the whole thing was changing and shifting without school, even in my own house and my own family. My mom was getting kind of restless, and my sister was born, and she liked my sister better. Clearly, my sister and I talked about this lately.
Mm.
And she started being meaner and meaner to me. That was before I went to school. When I went to school, I was so happy. I liked my teacher so much because she saw me, she looked at me, she listened to me. Even if I hadn't gotten good grades, I think she would have liked me. And I thought when I was in school that the teachers who liked me because I got good grades. And then I became a teacher, and my favorite kid was one who could hardly read. He was 12. He was sweet. He was thoughtful. He was clever. He was kind. And he wasn't a good student at all. And I thought, oh my gosh. And I started rethinking, and I started thinking, wait, some of these teachers are still friends of mine. Like, they kept up with me outside of school. That wasn't because I made good grades. And then I started thinking about other friends of mine who also made good grades that the teachers never much paid attention to. They didn't like them that much. They weren't that nice. So I had to rethink my whole life when I saw myself who believed that getting good grades makes you a better person in the eyes of other humans, that they'll pick you because of your grades. When I saw it wasn't happening, even for someone who believed in it, I started reviewing everything I knew, and it all changed. So
Mm.
there are things that I know there are people who still feel really terrible because they got bad grades. They can't fix that. And I feel bad because I helped without meaning to, as a teacher and as a student both, be the agent of that. There are some kids who would be happy to this day if one time they had gotten the highest grade in the class. Too bad, kid, I'm getting the highest grade in the class, scoot. It wasn't going to happen. But one time I got a B on purpose because the other kids were bugging me. They said, we never get to have the high grades because you're always getting an A, and you should stop. And I said, okay. So the next time we had an end of the week science test, I got myself an 85 or a 90, which would have been a B. I just missed a couple or three so that I would get a B. My parents were called in to the counselor and the principal, and there's this big meeting. Why did you do that? Because these other kids wanted me to get a B because they were tired of me getting A's. And they said, well, you can't do that. I said, I can. I did. But they said, you don't do that anymore. Don't do that anymore. That's terrible. You need to get the best grade you can. And I said, why? It was like eighth grade science. And I said, but I knew it, right? You knew I knew the right answers. That's why my parents are here. So it was really interesting because I was always analytical about what they were doing and how schools work because I wanted to be a teacher since I was 6. So that was my lab. I was watching which teachers liked kids, and yet through all of those years, I missed that maybe there was something about me besides the A's that made people talk to me and pay attention to me because my first grade teacher didn't know, or maybe she did. I don't know. So it's damage from school is inevitable even if you made really good grades. There'll be regrets, there'll be frustrations, there'll be things that you wish had gone differently. You wish they had taught you this that they didn't. I've never known anybody who didn't have any trauma, who went to school who didn't have some school trauma. I may not know any unschoolers who were unschooled who don't have some unschooling trauma, a little bit, but just like regret that they didn't play football, or some little thing, some little social thing. I knew some kids who wish they'd had lockers. I have a teenage granddaughter now, and they don't have lockers at school, so she can't keep like medical supplies for herself because she doesn't have a place. She only has her backpack. So things change, but people see it's like the grass is always greener. You see what somebody else has or did or talks about, and you have a little pang of regret. That can't be helped either.
But if we're trying to avoid fears and doubts, then regret is another red flag. It's another route to not walk down, really.
Fear is usually fear of regret, isn't it? Fear of regret.
Yeah.
Like I'm afraid if I keep going, I'm going to be sorry I didn't stop. Life is can go so many directions. Some people are really glad that they still live in the same house they grew up in their whole lives. They're glad to have the familiar same. I'm glad to have my neighbor back. The same neighbor that I had when the kids were little. I'm in the house where my kids were born now. It's nice. There are memories of all of my little kids in this whole house. But I think maybe pointing that out to people who are afraid or who are doubtful, just say everybody has regrets. So what are we going to do tomorrow? What are we going to do this afternoon? If you live in the moment and you do the best you can in that moment, not even thinking of days, because sometimes people go, oh, this is a terrible day at 10 in the morning. It's like, oh, what are we going to do for the rest of this terrible day? Let's don't do that. Let's say you had a bad moment, move on.
Yeah.
There are lots of moments to come. Make those good. And if the parent and the child are not getting unschooling and they keep trying and they keep trying and it's not working, maybe it's not going to work. So then the next piece of advice I have for people is let your kid go to school if they want to, let them go to school, but you don't need to become a deputy of the school. You don't need to become an agent of the school to enforce their rules and enforce homework and all of that sort of thing. They're not paying you enough to be an assistant teacher at your house. So if you have something more fun to do and the kid had homework, send them a note and say, we went to Disneyland, that's why there's no homework. And then be brave. Be confident that they'll have more good memories and more experiences and probably more learning from a day at an amusement park than they would have by doing an English assignment. And if your kid brings in grades that aren't perfect, say, okay, let's go back to Disneyland or whatever you can afford to do. Let's go for pizza. Yay, you got a C. Here, have ice cream. It doesn't matter. They don't have to help the school harm their child. It's another tradition, isn't it? That if you put your kids in school, you'll do what the school says. So the school feels like they have control of the parents and the children.
Oh, but they do.
Seems like, huh?
It's not like it feels like it. And even the rebellion you're talking about there, it's hard to do in real life. I always recommend it if you feel your child has to be in school for some reason. I say the exact same thing. You don't have to be the policeman of the school. You don't have to obey the rules. The school has the child until the school is out. You go home and it's your private time. You can do what you want with that time. You don't have to show up for things. You don't have to sign papers. You don't have to, I mean, and you can do that, but it's actually hard to do in real life. And what I've seen is also that the children kind of suffer if the parents don't cooperate with the school, because then becomes even harder to be there. So it has to be done in a very delicate way, and it can, and I think it should be done to make it very clear to children who are in school that the reality of the school is not the only reality out there, that their
Right.
value as human beings has nothing to do with their school performance. I've heard one guy who said, my parents made sure that I knew to take care that school wouldn't get in the way of my life, that it wouldn't stop me from doing the really important things I needed to do in life. And they told him that when he was 10. Don't let this get in the way. You have to go. It was mandatory in his country. Don't let it get in the way of your life. It's a good message to send to its school child, I think.
Especially in a case where the child has a choice, when the parents would be willing to or able to homeschool if the child wants to come home. That's a valuable position to be in. My sister had 3 children and she let them all come home at some point because of little problems, this and there. And one of them never went back to school, stayed home, did art, was having a great time. 2 of them went back to school for 2 different reasons in 2 different schools. So in both cases, my sister told the teachers and the principal, she said, I would rather he'd stay home. So you need to woo him. You need to make him happy if you want him to stay here.
Yeah.
So it was her position of power, and it worked. It helped. One of them just went to school to play basketball. And she said, he just wants to play basketball. I don't care if he gets A's. If all he has to get is a C, that's fine. The other one had been a gifted, and that's part of why he wanted out of school, because he was the hinge on which gifted activities happened for his whole class. Because there was a gifted child in that class, a gifted teacher would come and do things with the whole group so that he could get this experience. And so when he was absent, that wouldn't happen, and the kids would be mad at him. When it did happen, they would tease him, they would make fun of him. So when he went to the other school, he wanted to make sure he wasn't gifted. He didn't want to be in a position of everybody looking at him and having expectations or resentments. So he got low B's, I think he said, or C's. He decided what grades he was going to get, and he would just do that. He would figure out how much homework he had to ignore, how many things he had to miss on a test. They're grading him on in-class participation, so he wouldn't. So it was fun. He didn't just throw the whole thing off. He did that much work, 70% or whatever he was aiming for. So it became like a game for him to do that much and no more. So he made himself an average student with great effort.
Wow, amazing. I kind of want to roll back to the whole we were exploring does unschooling work and what if it doesn't work and what does it even mean that it works and what do they learn and you said this thing about running around with a stick in the garden. Maybe they become a gardener, or maybe they become an architect, or maybe it's biology. And I know your position, Sandra, but I just wanted to touch upon the fact that childhood is not an arrow pointing at a career. It's not a fast track to how you're going to make your money later on. It's not,
Yeah.
and what they do when they are small, younger, even older, but still under our wings, it's not all going to be lifelong passions. It's
Yeah.
not, you can't, you don't know, they don't know, and it's not the point of the running around with the stick to figure out what's my lifelong passion. And it's not the point of the childhood to acquire an academic level of some sort and a filter as to where will I go with my career. I don't think I want to define what the point of childhood is, because that's maybe ethically kind of wrong. But I think we need to stop and think about, hey, what are we here for? What is the what is going on in these years? And what do we as parents believe is truly important to experience over these years? There's no way we can stop them from learning. I feel like we've been dancing around that tree quite a few times, just like they will all walk, they will all read, and they will all acquire some I'm looking for a word, conglomerate, maybe some.
A model of the universe.
No, I'm just thinking they will pile on some knowledge and some skills and some experiences. That's hard to avoid. Childhood is a 20-year process, maybe. So of course they come out of it with something. That happens. We don't have to force it, and we don't need to know what that something is. What pieces are in that puzzle, or what tools are in that toolbox, whatever metaphor. But maybe we can think about what kind of presence, what kind of sense of self, what philosophy did we remember to talk about ethics? Do we have an experience with coping with different situations in life? Do we have trust? Do we know how to work with it if we don't? There's so many other things to unfold and acquire over these years. And I'm sorry to say, because I like to be the smart one and the one who wanted to unschool. In my marriage, my husband was very much against it for a long time. Well, once he surrendered, he surrendered completely. And I would have what I called black days back in the day, where I would have experienced a lot of fear and doubt about the whole thing in the beginning. And he would be like, you know what? I don't care. I don't even care if they can read. I don't care. I care if they can love. I care if they feel confident in their bodies. I care if they can form meaningful friendships. I care if they take responsibility for everything, not everything, something around them. He was shifting the whole idea about what is this all about? What are we supporting being their parents? Math, if you need it, you can learn it. Self-esteem, if that's hurt, that's a hard one. If you don't find love in your life, that's a bitter pill to swallow. So he said, what I want from my children's childhood, what I want their takeaway to be, and what I want them to be dressed up for once they fly off. It's not about that. It's not about a career choice. They can change career 5 times or more during their life, where they have to somehow feed themselves and house themselves, or or contribute in some sort of way. It's not about that, to grow up under my wings. It's about who you become and how you handle being in this life. For us, unschooling is very much about that. That is the centerpiece. The academics is hobby.
But you're Danish, and I saw your episode about the Danish way of parenting. So those are things they teach in school in Denmark, apparently, that they don't teach in the United States, about self-esteem and kindness and love. And I'm partly joking, but I'm not totally joking. Some people don't see that, or some people don't even feel any responsibility to help their kids with that if their kids are in school or not. They forget. They expect church to do it or something. It's weird. People are weird. But I think when I made the example about the kid in the backyard, it wasn't to encourage a kid to go to the backyard. It was, when you look back in 20 years, sometimes you look back and you see elements of interests that now the child is using for a job. My kids are all in their 30s, so I do look at jobs. So Marty has always liked maps. He's always been interested in maps. And the last 3 jobs he's done have had to do with maps. One of them super directly. He was working for a contractor, and he was working with Apple Maps. So if you ask Siri where you are, help me get there, Siri can help you. So there are a lot of things about that I hadn't known. Like, they know where there's construction, when there's going to be a light, if there's a traffic light built, when are they going to activate it? So he knew all of that about the whole state of New Mexico. He did New Mexico so well that they gave him another couple of states. So he used to be afraid of the phone, and he was calling people like the city planner of some county. New Mexico has 33 counties. So he had to know who in each county knows about the roads. And so for him, he was the only one working in New Mexico. He didn't have a supervisor who knew more about New Mexico than he did. They just said, here's what we do it. So for him, that was a blast. It was really fun. And before that, he had been mapping underground water for the water authority. And there was a fuel spill years ago on the airbase. And they're trying to figure out how long it will take that it's passing through sand very, very slowly. Will it ever get to the river? It may or may not. I think it's about 4 miles from the river now, 4 or 5 miles. So he was mapping underground. That was fun for him. And so we didn't say, Marty, get a job with maps. He just sort of bumbled along, and friends of his said, there's this, and somebody got him that job with the water authority, a friend of my husband's. It was an internship, but he worked there a long time, and it was real money. They wanted a biology major, but they didn't find one. So he was taking geography, and they said, well, that's close, because we're doing mapping. So we didn't know what of the things he played with and read on the internet, or what games he played, would affect his life. And he might change jobs totally, but 3 in a row had to do with maps. And I think so I look back and I go, oh, remember this time he was really interested in this map of this game, or remember that time he wanted a map of New Mexico territory when it was part of Arizona and New Mexico were all one territory. So I'm thinking about retrospect, how the parents shouldn't condemn what a child is doing, because years later you might look back and see what that was good for. You may not know what he's learning now. You may not know what he's learning for 5 years or 10 years. But when you look back, you start to see trails and tendrils and patterns. That doesn't stop anybody's doubts or fears in the moment, usually, to say, oh, it'll be different in 20 years, because they can't imagine 20 years. They're afraid now. They're afraid today.
But it's a better truth to hold. It's a better thing to keep reminding yourself that nothing we learn will ever be in vain. And all the skills we have will at some point be really important. whatever they are, sometimes in surprising ways. So, and everything we do will have the side effect of layering on more knowledge, more experience, more skills, or better skills, more nuanced skills. It cannot be, I mean, even sitting and watching paint dry will give us the skill of keeping our minds calm. So whatever we do, we will grow. The strategized, we're doing this so that we're making sure that the child is ready for that and the other. That's the curriculum-based school style, could be school at home, but still school style way of thinking about things. Whereas from an unschooling point of view, we would say we need to trust this. We need to trust that it will all fall into place, and that it has already fallen into place, because we're doing these things because they make sense here now. Later on, they will make sense in different contexts for different reasons. And some of those reasons would be to make money. Some reasons might be to keep our homes safe. Some reasons might be to maintain our relationships in life. Some reasons might be to stay healthy, if we need to work on that. So there could be many important things where skills that we acquired through non-strategized activities come in handy. And as parents in an unschooling context, we need to learn to trust that. So that could be what we're piling on, instead of saying, oh, tell me about your worst day. Then tell me about how many times you've seen you have good reason to trust what's going on.
That's what we were trying to do, to pile up good stories. I have such a collection on my website. I want to say
You do.
my
You
website is
certainly
set
do.
up so that you could just go to the search and put in any question, just throw something in there, and it'll take you to some pages. Every page has at least 3 links, maybe 6 or 8, and you can just follow your own trail.
It's a true
And
rabbit hole.
sometimes you just have to read 2 quotes and you're good, and sometimes you could read the whole page or come back to it the next day and just immerse yourself in that topic or that question or that fear. I think we have the answers to a lot of these fears gathered up there from 30 years of online discussions, where I saved the best parts and I've put them in a flow so that one can lead to another. A lot of those originals are not available anymore. I was editing a page yesterday and it said, I put this here for backup in case this other site disappears. And I lined through and said, it's gone. So it happens. So the only place it exists now is on my site. But I knew it was a good one, and I duplicated it. So I think even if people feel isolated and there aren't any good discussions that they can get in that are daily and busy, if they're really worried, they could take a dive into my site or Joyce's, or listen to more of your podcasts, or go to Sue's site and just read a little bit, follow some links. Remember that other people have had those fears and had those concerns and those doubts. Sometimes the doubt is, I doubt I can do this, the parent. And sometimes it's, I doubt my kid's very smart, or I doubt my kid will do anything. But those can, from one minute to the next, if the mom is like trying to do better, trying to be more patient, trying to be more creative, trying to be more attentive, she will feel better about the kind of mom she's being. The child will respond to that attention and stimulation and peace. And together they move gradually toward a better, safer place of better relationships and learning. I think that's valuable. Neither one can do it alone. The kid can't unschool alone if the parents don't know what it is and don't believe in it. And if the child is really, really interested in it and is trying to get the parents to do it, if the parents never get it, then it's still not going to work. The parents are still going to be going, yeah, but you should do this instead. So it can't be all of a sudden, it's gradual, and the feedback should come from the children. The feedback within the family is way more valuable than feedback from outside. Because I could tell somebody, oh, you're such a great unschooling mom, but that doesn't make it true. only her kids will believe she is or isn't a great unschooling mom, because they're the ones who are affected by it. They're the ones who need to live in that nest, live in that environment.
I have so many notes that I've been jotting down while you've both been talking because what you've been saying is so interesting. But so I don't know, jumping all over the place here, my thoughts. This is what I like, Cecilia. We were talking right at the beginning, I think even before you press record, how the discussions might help our listeners, but isn't it enjoyable and fruitful for us as well to bounce ideas around and to think more deeply about these things ourselves and examine our own ideas and experiences. But I was something you were saying, I was ages ago, Sandra, because I've been jotting down all these little thoughts that I want to ponder later. But you were saying something about a terrible day. You get up at 10 in the morning and you've declared it's a terrible day. And it just reminded me of a day like that, but it wasn't 10 o'clock. It was something like 8 o'clock in the morning, and the whole morning just fell apart. I was overtired. I dropped a jar of jam all over the floor. It was sticky and it was bits of glass, and I don't know, maybe a couple of kids were arguing. I cannot remember all the details. All I remember was thinking, having doubts about what we were doing, and thinking to myself, what right do I have to write about unschooling? I'm having a terrible day. If anybody could look into my life at this very minute, they would think I was incompetent, didn't know what I was talking about. And yeah, I wouldn't be a help to anyone. And went to, I thought maybe I've told this story before on this podcast. I can't remember. I've told it a number of times, but I went to delete my blog because I said to my daughter, Imogen, I said, it's all false. It's not true. Unschooling, all those stories I've written, hundreds of them, they're not true. Today, I can see that I this is the real day. All that is false. I've just been trying to convince everybody that unschooling is the right thing to do, or it's a good thing to do. And my daughter said to me, "But Mum, that was yesterday. All those things happened on other days, and they were all true on those days. Just because today you're having a bad day doesn't say that everything that happened up to this point wasn't true and wasn't good." And she said, "You're having a bad day, Mum." And she says, "Don't delete it." And it made me think that we all have bad days, that we all make mistakes. We all drop the jam jar. We all try not to. And I think Sandra is right. As we unschool more and we tune into our kids and we realize what's really important, and as we change as people, we stop yelling when the bathwater spills on the floor or the jam jar hits the kitchen tiles. But we have days when we're overtired and things aren't going well, and that is okay. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to have bad days. It doesn't mean that we should throw it all in the bin and start again and look around and say, well, that didn't work. How about Charlotte Mason? Or how about school? That one bad day or a bad few days or whatever shouldn't define who we are and what we're doing because life isn't perfect. And I think maybe that's something that we all aim for is perfection. And I felt that as a blogger and a blogger who shares personal stories, that pressure to appear perfect all the time. And I have written a number of blog posts about imperfection. But going back to something you said, Cecilia, about love. And that is the prime thing in my motivation to unschool my kids was love, the unconditional love, listening to them, respecting them, trusting them, having time for them. And I came to the conclusion, like you, that it wasn't academics. It was, there's nothing more important than love. And so when you get to, or what shall I doubt. I don't know what to do. I always say, choose the option that follows the path of love. Don't choose the one that will end. Like some people say, and I believe this at one point, I have to yell at my kids because otherwise they won't do what I want them to do. And I thought, well, yelling isn't love, is it? And getting them to do what I want to do isn't love. So that option's out. And the funny thing is that by putting all that as number one, the love and the listening and the respecting, I don't think our kids can fail to learn because we've talked about how learning doesn't happen very well in fearful conditions. But when our kids feel accepted and trusted and respected, and they just thrive. That's nurturing, isn't it? They're going to do well or whatever they're meant to do well at. Maybe not get those A's in science, but that might not be their pathway, but they're going to do well. And anyway, that was just a few of my
Can I
inputs
add
as I
to
was
that?
jotting things down as you were talking. And I thought, wow, I want to say something about that. You've made a great point there.
I think it's a great point. And I wanted to add that I think children who grow up in this context will do well at what they're doing. Part of that is also that they will be able to define what they want to do and what doing well means. They are not accustomed to waiting for someone else to tell them this is the path and this is the way you do it right. I think it's a very important skill that comes from unschooling to be able to define where am I going? Why am I going there? How do I know I arrived? One of the things I really don't like about schools and education style for younger children, we have something called learning goals in the Danish school system. I think it's an international problem. But the whole, I love learning, and I actually enjoy immensely to take courses and to listen to, I mean, to take guided tours or go to talks of things, and yeah, it's amazing. But I don't like to be manipulated, and I don't like to be told what I am supposed to learn from what I'm doing. If I'm going and I'm listening to, I just listened to a conference on what about how do we handle the question of truth in the context of AI? No one's going to tell me what the takeaways are. They can tell me what they think and what the research says and what the philosophers come up with. And then I do my thinking and I pick the things I need to take from there. And I think a lot of this learning goal, strategized teaching, where you present things in a certain order in order to the child to have some specific knowledge arranged and understand things in a specific way, so you can ask them a question in the end and they will come up with the right answer. What if something completely different about the whole thing sparks their passion and interest? What if they take away the tone of voice you had, or yeah, just something different? And as our children are not learning in this context, they learn to defy, they learn to be exploring and creative, and they learn to define their own success. They can give something an A if they need to. We could go buy them a little sticker book with gold stars and they could put them everywhere they want. because they define what a gold star means and where it's supposed to go. And I think that's a very powerful skill to have in life. Am I rambling? Is
Cecilia,
it
you were
getting late?
saying you don't like to be told what to think, but what if our kids and we give them the opportunity to explore their own thoughts and ideas? What if a child expresses an idea that we don't agree with? I feel that's a fear that a lot of people have about fundamental things that are important to the parent, and the child has different ideas about that. And I see so many parents wanting to tell kids what they have to think and haven't got the what's the word? They don't want to give the child space to explore that idea and come to their own conclusions. But what if a child does come to a different conclusion than the parent on some fundamental level, without sort of breaking, telling personal stories? It's hard to find examples, but there are things that are dear to our hearts. And then when we give our kids the freedom to explore ideas and everything, they might come to a different conclusion to us. But then as I've been thinking this through, as I'm talking now, I'm thinking, even if parents tell their kids what they should think, and kids get used to saying, I agree, it doesn't mean they do agree. And as soon as they have the chance, they're going to go away and disagree. So
I
it
was
doesn't mean
thinking,
anything anyway. Isn't it better to give our kids space to explore ideas and come to their own conclusions? But the point I think I'm trying to make is that I've had so many people come up to me and, well, not come up to me because I'm on the other side of the world, but
there are other
contact
people
me.
over there, I think.
Huh?
You're not the only one
There are
on that
there are
side of the
people over
world.
here, but there are no unschoolers in my vicinity. I
Oh,
haven't come across any. But the point is, I think that they say to me, well, if we unschool and give our kids the freedom, what happens if they decide that they're going to be an atheist or going to be a Muslim or going to run off and live a different lifestyle to the one that we live, or they're going to pick up different ideas that aren't compatible with the parents' ideas. So we have to hold on to our kids tight. We can't give them that freedom because parents don't want to risk their children uh, being exposed or having the freedom to explore those ideas. But maybe that comes down to also the people that our kids will listen to. I say listen to, we listen to each other, or the influence maybe are the ones that are closest to them, and how we make connections with our children so that they trust us and we trust them. And they're more open to listening to our ideas, especially if they're not forced upon them. If there's that freedom to have that give and take between you and just explore ideas. So why should a child go out and listen to somebody that they're not connected with for their I pick up those ideas. I think I'm going around and not being very um, articulate about what I
we
wanted
might
to
be getting
say.
a little bit tired at this point, which is fine. I
But
think
you're tired, but I've just started my day,
no. But I mean, we've
Cecilia.
all been talking for a while. It's not about what time of day it is. I think you're touching upon a very important thing, and I'm smiling to myself because we had for some reason that we'd all forgotten because it's been a while between recording episode 9 and episode 10. Um, so we had fears, doubts, and relationships in the same in the headline for this, and we're like, let's take the relationships out. It seems like a weird mix. But actually, I'm thinking now when you said, what if we give our children this freedom? What if they start thinking something we don't agree with? I was thinking, hey, wait a minute. They have that freedom. They were born with that. Yes?
I think if someone came to me and expressed what Sue's saying, what if we unschool and then my child does whatever he wants to, makes other decisions, doesn't behave as I believe he should. Isn't that more likely if a kid's in school? Because they'll be exposed to all kinds of other kinds of people and ideas in the absence of their parents. They may not come home and talk about it. They may come home and be secretive about it. They may be proselytized into some cult or something. I mean, that's where people get into cults, or okay, people my age got into cults in the 70s at college. They would go off to university and people would be telling them all kinds of stuff that wasn't like their parents told them. And the parents are far, far away, maybe. So I don't think that's a danger of unschooling so much as it's just a reality of the world, but probably more dangerous if the children and parents are not physically or emotionally close. And maybe the next discussion should be about relationships.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not taking up another discussion right now. What I was trying to express was just this freedom to become who you become and to think your own thoughts and make your own choices is a freedom we're born with, and it is going to happen. And I
It's a
think if
reality.
we take that freedom away, or we try to take that freedom away from our children, and think that we, by being, I don't know, some sort of authority, can control who they become, well, we will ruin the relationship with them, and we will not know it when they make a different choice, or when they question my or our core ideas and core values, because they know, oh, they just need to please us, to pretend that they think what we want them to think, so that they can get the love that we have conditioned into. You need to think what I think, otherwise you're not getting the love, which means you're in real danger of suffering from real problems like starvation and cold. I mean, that is the power we have over our children. We're providing them basic safety, and the core of that is because we love them. So if there is a threat to that love, it's actually quite uncomfortable and unfair.
That's not fair.
It's not
Um,
Yeah.
fair.
when people talk about freedom, I have a couple of brief things about freedom and a lot on my site. Parents can only give as much freedom as the parents have to give. So sometimes when people talk about freedom, it's irritating to me because an unschooler can't have more freedom than another resident or citizen or, person has in that area, in that world, wherever they are. There's only, freedom is limited by social realities in the government, and the parents can't give total freedom to anybody because they don't have any. Um, the other thing is there's freedom from things like safety, departure, being isolated from bad influences, maybe, to be freedom from school, freedom from homework, freedom from school schedules. And then there's freedom too, the freedom to do things. So freedom's complicated to think about. But I sometimes people just say you have freedoms, like freedom from or freedom to. It's just a thought to throw in the pile.
Yeah, I just noted maybe we should say episode 11, relationships, episode 12, freedom, and just for the record, for the listeners, we might change that 5 times. There's no guarantee here, but it's a big topic.
It is.
But I do think that in the context of this, with the whole fear thing, it's a real fear that some people have if I allow this home educating, unschooling lifestyle, and I let my children explore what they want, how can I control then what they think? And the point I'm trying to get at is, you can't control who they become.
You can't. And when you said you're this way when you're born, looking at my life and my husband's life, my husband's been retired for over 5 years. Was his whole life building up to what kind of retired grandpa he would be? Is my whole life, when I was born, was I building up to being a 71-year-old Sandra? I don't know, because it's the whole range of my life is like one element, one me. And there were dark days and there were bright days and there were frustrations and there were joys. And that's how lives are. Children's lives, they're building up to things the parents can't really envision. I mean, we can have a vision of even what they'll look like, whether they'll have beards or not, whether they'll be married or not, but we could be wrong. It's just sort of a wish list of the parents or a fantasy of the moment. So they're becoming they are themselves. They're already themselves when they're born. And they're growing into an adult version of themselves. And then they may, if we're all lucky, grow up into an old version of themselves. So it's not that we built them and can tinker with them and create them in a way that we've imagined. And so that may be a good way to help some parents get over their doubts and fears. It probably would just make them more doubtful and fearful at first.
But it's true.
It's true.
So maybe they just need to sit with that truth for a while. It is what it
I
is.
like talking. I like talking to you guys. It's fun.
So do I. But I also think my dogs are barking because it's midnight and the kids are coming
Okay.
back up
All
the
right.
stairs. I'm actually not tired, but I'm
We're
happy
in
to know
such
that we're talking in a few days again. So
Me too. For the listeners, we're in such different places that Sue probably hasn't had breakfast yet. I'm about to go to dinner with my husband, and it's midnight in
it's
Hungary.
midnight in Budapest. Yeah.
I
It's
I think we sit here and we have a million stories and a million ideas, and I don't think we can do any topic justice in 2 hours. But as you said, Cecilia, we get tired and our brains stop functioning as efficiently as they did at the beginning. But isn't it fascinating that we could come back at the end of the week and just continue the discussion? And I'm really looking forward to that. It's just, I don't know who we're doing these for, Cecilia. Are we doing these podcasts for listeners, or are you doing them for me?
maybe for me.
Ah,
For me, because I enjoy them and I'm enjoying your friendship and finding out more about you as we're talking. It's good.
I enjoy these conversations immensely. I really do. And I'm very happy to have we're switching it around for the listeners. So you're going to see maybe completely new versions of us. I'm going to do an
mm.
early morning instead of a late
Ah,
night.
I think the last episode, what was it? 6? Oh, that wasn't the last episode. There's an episode that's just been released as we're talking, and it's wonderful, and I loved it. What is it? What's the topic
I
of it?
think it was
Repetition.
six.
Repetition.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Episode
repetition. That's
6.
a good one. If you haven't seen that one, listen to it. It's just great.
So was this, I hope. I feel it. I feel like it was a good one. Thank you for this one.
I think that it's like when you write books and people say, an author would say, I really love this book that I've written. And then somebody might say, well, that sounds a bit, you shouldn't judge your own books, that you're saying you love your own books. That's not very humble. And I always think, well, if you don't love your own books, then other people won't love them. And I think it's the same with a conversation. If we don't enjoy ourselves, other people aren't going to enjoy it. And I've enjoyed this one immensely.
I agree. Thank you for joining today.